Hello and welcome back to my slightly flooded and very damp garden. Some of you may be aware that there was a hurricane that formed in the Gulf of Mexico, I believe it was, and then it skipped across Florida, and her name was Debbie, and then she became a tropical storm, and then she became a tropical depression. Well, I think it's just a tropical depression right now, somewhere around Raleigh right now, or heading towards Raleigh, something like that. And where I am in eastern North Carolina, we have been getting a lot of rain. The last few days, if I had to take an educated guess, and I do have rain gauges, but they keep filling up and I keep dumping them. And I would say we probably got about 8 inches of rain over the last maybe 3 to 4 days. It's been very wet. And that's on top of the rain that we've had from previous storms and weather events. And the ground is just super saturated right now. Super saturated. I actually don't have to worry about probably watering anything in the ground for another 3 weeks. That's if it stops raining. But nonetheless, it's just weather. This is what happens. And thankfully, at least where I am, no major flooding and no major wind damage. The shade cloth here is pulled up a little bit and it's got a little wonky, and that's because A, it's 90% shade cloth, so it's almost solid. So it has been catching the wind, as you can see. But normally I wouldn't have too much of a problem with wind gusts up to 35 miles per hour because it's staked down really well. Unless the ground becomes super saturated and the stakes pull out of the ground. So I've restaked the shade cloth here, and hopefully it holds out for the next day or two until this thing finally clears away, and then I'll properly re-secure it and relay it, that kind of thing. My post is still standing, and the garden as a whole is pretty much unaffected. Surprisingly, my lemon tree, which has fallen over, if you hear any beeping, that's the UPS or FedEx guy pulling into a driveway someplace. Oh, that wind. And it's not even that strong. Surprisingly, my lemon tree is still standing. Last year when we had some tropical storms, it kept flipping over. But this year, I put some bricks underneath as opposed to little potting feet, and I believe it's been holding the lemon tree much, much better. So that's still standing. Generally, there's no real damage to the garden. Once everything settles down, I'll do a more thorough inspection, and maybe I'll have a couple of snapped flower stems or something along those lines. But I think for the most part, we're A-okay. All that being said, I've been stuck in the house quite a bit lately, obviously, because of the rain. And right now, we've got rain to the north of us and rain to the south of us. So that's why I'm able to sneak outside right now. Either way, I did manage to do something which I've been meaning to do, which has sort of been on the schedule. And it was something I could do that was quick and easy. And that is start taking cuttings. And here I have a waterlogged verbena. I had something in this pot, but it's now blown away. And here I have some big blue salvia. This one also tipped over, but I was able to recover it this morning. And here's a blue victory. And I figured, why not do some cuttings now while we've got all this rain. The clouds are also helpful because the plant won't, as soon as you cut a piece of, you guys know this, experts or people with gardening experience, you guys all know this, but as soon as you cut that plant, that piece of plant off, it's basically stressing out. It's you know, it's going to die unless you do something with it really quick. And normally you would either pot it right away, put it in some water, do something with it really quick. And the sun and the heat tend to also stress out the plant, even if you do put it in some sort of growing medium, a perlite or whatever it is that you're taking cuttings of. In this case, I have it in potting mix. So I thought to myself, let me take advantage of this and let me do some quick cuttings. It's not something that's super exciting, but it is something that I think is good to do at this time of year, especially under these conditions for me. But hopefully a lot of these plants will have taken root by the time that fall rolls around. Some of these, depending upon their growth stages, I may plant out. Others I may just keep in the greenhouse over the winter. So let me show you an example of a technique that I saw recently that might work, might not work, but we're gonna find out. So let me get my clippers and some samples. All right, so here's some big blue salvia here. And normally, and if I'm doing something wrong, please chime up, chime in, let me know. From my understanding though, let's chop that. I'm going to strip the leaves from right below this leaf node. Get rid of those. I'm going to get rid of some extra big leaves. I'm going to get rid of a lot of these leaves. So I'm just going to leave these few leaves, and then I'm going to stick it into the pre-moistened soil. And of course, I'll label. Actually, I may have some labels laying around here someplace, but... And then let me just do one more. Get rid of that. All right, so this one, I'm just going to cut right below the leaf node. Strip all these off. Okay, and then stick that in the pre-moistened soil. I'm not worried about the depth of the soil per se or the size of the pot. Once I start seeing new growth and I see the plant starts putting on some serious growth, I can always up pot these, so I'm not worried about it. There's a label. And there's a label. So here are these two, and I'll put them on the bench, and if we get more rain, great. And then after it stops raining, hopefully for a few days, and these start putting on growth. All right, so now this new method that I've seen recently, and I don't know how successful it's going to be, but we're going to give it a try, is, let me chop that off. So here I have a piece of verbena. And normally, I would tear all this off, and I would just leave the leaves. I would take the flower stems off, which I'm still going to do. So like I said, I would strip the bottom leaves off, and I would leave the top leaves, and I would stick this in a pot, and it would grow on. There's this pretty big gap here. Now this is not a great example. I have other pieces of verbena out there, I'm sure, which have much larger gaps between the leaves. And in the example that was shown, it was for the example was salvia. And whatever variety of salvia the gentleman was doing, I can't think of his name, but it's Frasier family or Fraser Valley Rose Farm or something. I'm going to leave a link below, and I'll maybe leave a link here on the screen. But nonetheless, what he was saying was, since we've cut right beneath the leaf node, as I've dumped pots on the ground, we're going to cut right above the leaf node. So we have a cut above and below the leaf node, and we're just going to stick this into the pre-moistened soil. Now, in his example, he was doing salvia. Here, this is verbena bonnerosus. But theoretically, hypothetically, it should start putting on roots and then start putting on growth. Maybe, possibly. Again, here's a good example. So I could stick this whole thing in the ground, but now I'm missing the leaf node. And from my understanding is the roots grow from the leaf node. So in this case, again, just going to take right below the leaf node. I've got two leaves. I could even cut the leaves back if I wanted to, but I don't think that's going to be necessary. And just stick it in the pot. Now, there's not a lot there, so I'm going to try to put this in a sheltered place just so it doesn't, you know what, just for giggles, because we have these winds, I'm going to cut these leaves halfway back. And I'm just going to stick this in the ground, or stick this in the pot, water it in good, and then hopefully within a few days or a week or so, it starts rooting and it starts putting on growth in a few weeks. Okay, here's an example that I just found. Apparently it blew out of its pot, but hopefully you guys can see this, that it is putting on new growth. And I think I can barely see, I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this, it looks like it's barely putting on some roots. I'm just going to turn around and stick this back in to the pot here. I'm going to add some water just to make sure the soil settles around the plant. And I'm going to move it to a slightly more sheltered position. So hopefully that doesn't blow away. There it is. And there's a lot of the other cuttings I've taken recently amongst all the other plants. Now I have other cuttings which I've taken in the past couple of days. Here's a regular verbena, has a long stem, so the stem comes down to probably to about here in the pot. That's more of a traditional cutting, I guess. But this other technique that I saw from, again, I think it's Fraser Rose, I'll put it here on the screen. It seemed interesting to me in the cases where you had really long gaps or stems between the leaf nodes, and you maybe had like shallower or smaller plant trays. In his example, and I'll link his video below, he was planting a lot of salvia cuttings into small seedling trays. So it would be, it wasn't good that he would have such a tall stem sticking out above the soil with the plant up here. So he wanted it, I guess, to be more, he explains it much better than I do. So I suggest you go check out the link, check out his channel. He's a rose farmer or rose grower up in Canada, I believe. And it just seemed like a neat idea to me. So I thought I'd give it a shot. And it seems to be working. No ads today, no Sophia today, because she's staying inside where it's not flooded. But please go check out all those links below. Thank you everybody for watching me. And hopefully the sun comes out for our next video. I'm going to catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.